Welcome, everyone. I'm going to give it about a minute more. People are filtering in, and we have quite a few people today, so we just want to make sure we get a majority of the people participating. Okay, I think we'll begin. Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to the 5th Rapid Recovery Plan webinar. This webinar will be recorded, and the recording and the deck will be posted to the Rapid Recovery Plan webpage. The best practice sheets will be available soon. I am Emmy Hahn. I'm the program coordinator for the Mass Downtown Initiative and the Rapid Recovery Plan program. I'm joined today with Charles Sanderson, the Assistant Mass Downtown Initiative Program Coordinator. Charles will be managing the Q&A. At the end of the presentation, please put all your questions in the Q&A and not the chat. The topic today, getting people downtown, event marketing, digital marketing, and creating foot traffic couldn't be timelier. With the Rapid Recovery Plan communities entering the second phase of the program and starting to think about the final projects that they'll put in their final plans. So with today's information, we hope that some of those ideas will start to look more like reality. And with best practice sheets that will support the presentations, I think you'll be able to really put some definition to those projects. I know today the presentation has a lot of content, so I'm going to hand it off to the moderator, Matt Muskin. Matt.
Hey, thanks so much, Emmy. As mentioned, my name is Max Musicant, founder and principal of the Musicant Group. Really pleased to be here with you all. Our firm, our mission and service is to create places where people want to be, and along with esteemed colleagues here, I'm really excited to talk about the laws of attraction and how strategies to attract and keep people downtown in light of COVID-19. I'm joined by, can you go to the next slide? Jessica Mortel of Neighborways, Michelle Moon of Civic Space Collaborative, and Susan Silberg of Civic Moxie. And each will introduce themselves at the beginning of their presentations. Just some high-level frameworks to start with before we dive into the project explorations is COVID has obviously presented us with a lot of difficulties and challenges, but we're also entering this window as hopefully COVID continues to decline and vaccinations go up, where customer and visitor behavior is really up for grabs. We've all fundamentally changed the way that we use space and our visitation habits during COVID. And now that we're coming out, you know, there's this moment in time where people can reset what they're doing, and these habits and routines will really have long-term implications for our downtown to come. So it's quite timely that we leverage this moment and think about how we can create positive routines and traditions and habits that support our communities. And as we think about just an overall strategy of place, we want to think about not just attracting people downtown once, but how to keep them coming back again and again. And so I think for our firm, we have this useful framework to kind of keep in mind about how this happens. And so any given place, if it offers positive and useful experiences, people start to use it more. And the more people use a space, they start to develop these positive habits and routines. And this is really where the power of this work and these approaches that you'll hear from the various projects come in. And it's by getting people to come back again and again, where people form relationships between each other, relationships between themselves and the physical place, and that bond, which they can't take with them. It's very sticky. And then it also gives that regularity to merchants and businesses to have a customer base, whether that's daily, weekly, or even seasonal traditions. So these relationships are the foundation of both social and commercial value. And that's what we'll be unlocking about how to do that, how to create those habits and routines that support your downtown. And the way to deliver those positive and useful experiences is really taking an ecosystem approach, which you'll hear more about in our projects coming up. And that it's all about the interplay and the relationship between the physical environment of a place, how that place is taken care of and managed, and the events, activities, and uses that happen within that place. And to then constantly have iterations of user engagement, communications, and data collection around what's happening. And so it's this sort of cyclical process and holistic approach that's going to attract visitors, keep them there, and keep them coming back for more. And on a granular level, the stickiness of a place, if you're thinking about tactical things to implement, our group kind of came up with this six-fold list of things that really have a high impact. 1, food always attracts people. 2, shade, especially in the summertime. And as we'll see in the wintertime, warmth is also a big factor. 3, places to sit. 4, visual interest. 5, reflections of the local culture. And then 6, making sure that it's walkable, bikeable, and livable to get around in that space easily without getting into a car. Diving into our first project is next slide, please. Diving into our first project is one that we did with the suburban Main Street community outside the Twin Cities in Minnesota, in Wayzata, Minnesota. And here the lessons learned are they used to have they have long had a signature winter event that happened over one weekend, which because of COVID restrictions was not possible this year. And they also had a new public plaza that had opened up on one side of Main Street in what used to be a parking lot. So the challenge here was how do we create winter activations in the colder months that attract people, that keep them downtown with those unique cold weather constraints and support the surrounding businesses while creating community experiences that replace a signature event. Next slide, please. The overall budget for this was $90,000, which covered some larger events, weekly programming, physical improvements, project management, and staffing. The project was co-implemented by ourselves and the local Chamber of Commerce. It started with planning and doing kind of in tandem in November of this last year and ran through March of 2021. Next slide, please. So some of the strategies we took into solving those problems that we just laid out were 1, to create reasons to enjoy the space all the time. So the events are really important, but we wanted to make sure there was a vibrant space with lots of activities to do no matter when someone showed up. And that we use those then too, that we use those weekly events and those more signature events almost as marketing for the space itself. So if the events could draw people out into the space, we wanted them to be exposed to the downtown, exposed to the features of the new plaza in the wintertime, and to then have them incentivized to come back even when there wasn't programming happening. The third note is that we have an adage that bored people are cold people and that cold people go home. And so keeping people warm and ideally not all the time, but at least having places and opportunities for people to warm up if they got cold was really crucial, as well as keeping people engaged. If people have things to do, they're not going to be occupied and getting preoccupied with their body temp. They're going to feel warmer and they're going to be engaged and they're going to stick around. 4, if kids and dogs are happy, so are the adults, and the adults bring their wallets. And then 5, really leveraging partnerships with local organizations and businesses to reach broader audiences. So tactically on the ground, some of the features that we did to foster these strategies were we had, and getting back to that pyramid with the relationship piece, we had a letter writing campaign where you could write a letter to the adjacent lake and the lake would respond back to again create that relationship between the space and the people. It had lots of activities that you could always utilize, like Kub, which is a Nordic lawn game, and we built and then managed a curling court using synthetic ice but real granite stones. It was also very windy and dark and cold, which is what happens in the wintertime. And so we leveraged old Christmas trees, about 80 of them, to create pockets of activity through a winter garden, or pockets of intimacy through winter gardens, lighting installations, and using ice globes. We had fires that were both going during the program times, but also available for the public to build and manage throughout the time to really foster that warmth. Creating pop-up dog runs and petting zoos, which were a big hit with people and brought out a lot of folks and were fun for all generations. For signature events, fireworks was also very popular and a nice COVID-safe event. And then on a smaller level, doing live performances, trivia, oftentimes in partnership with adjacent restaurants, was very popular and drove revenue to those businesses. And then in terms of communication, utilizing social media and PR, but also having lots of on-site signage that both encourage people to have COVID safe behavior, but really communicate that there was always something happening there, and creating that narrative that, like, no matter when you showed up, something great was happening. And that really created that repetitious visitation. Next slide, please. So some of the risks that we faced here was we had a short timeline in terms of executing this. The collaborative relationship also, because of that speed and short-term planning, had a bit of clunkiness in terms of who roles and responsibilities. There's also just the risk and constraint of cold temperatures. No matter what you do, if it's below 10 degrees, it's going to be very difficult to bring people out. And then the last but not least, the staffing in the new space. It was a new space, so people we were always kind of working through kind of how it would operate, what its features were, and that some of the elements could staff themselves and some couldn't. The fires, it was very clear that people could take care of them themselves and didn't require on-site staffing. The curling court, on the other hand, got some wear and tear that signified that we needed to have some on-site personnel to manage that. So some of the key performance indicators that came out of that project were we saw a big jump in return visitors as we went through that site. So people were coming back again and again. There were lots of local press pieces about the space and the events and the interesting things that were happening there that drew people to the public space, but also more importantly to the adjacent businesses. And then as we went along, we saw people increasingly self-program. And so they were really taking ownership of the space themselves, creating their own fires, starting their own sing-alongs, dance parties, playing their own games, which is exactly what we want to see, and really shows that the positive momentum that is generating that attraction and retention of visitors. Next slide, please. And so other sort of takeaways for people on this call is for partnership, having on-site care, storage, and bathroom access is really key to making sure that it's a great experience and people can stay there long-term. Getting the city as a partner to sign off on things that sometimes make them nervous, like fires, food availability, and beer and wine is really key. And making sure that people have places to warm up, whether that's inside or outside. So lessons learned beyond that would be that this is a great example of how to translate what was a one-time large event that couldn't happen because of COVID and stretching it out over an entire season and potentially having even more of an impact that way. Two, communicating not only what will happen in the future for events to attract people, but also communicating what has happened to really memorialize that success and give people the confidence that whenever they show up, something's going to be happening. And that three, that people are really hungry for unique things to do in the wintertime, and we shouldn't give up on that time of the year, especially after the holidays, between that January, February, March timeframe where usually nothing is happening, but there's a huge opportunity to really serve a community and commercial need there. Next slide, please. The second and final case study for our work is our collaboration with the Rice and Larpenteur Alliance. And so this is an example of how to take a one-time event, do it safely in a larger footprint, to work at a location that is a confluence of both a suburban land use and urban at the same time, and creating sort of a there, and then also doing it with a lens for equity. And this was a very multicultural community with a lot of different cultural groups that were there. Next slide, please. And so our work with them we've been working with this organization for the last couple of years, but this last year we did 2 events for about $20,000, and it took place for a signature event in the summertime and then a winter gift promotion. And so what had happened in the centrally located parking lot of a strip mall was expanded over the course of the entire community. And also of note, another example, this is where 3 different municipalities all come together. So there's another aspect of multi-jurisdictional collaboration here, which is valuable. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, the strategies that we took for this event is to grow the footprint of it, and when doing so, making the travel between the larger event footprint, which spanned all four corners of the intersection, and even more than that, a benefit of the event rather than a bug. Two, to communicate invitation to the multicultural communities through translation and outreach. Three, acknowledging that the small businesses were struggling and not asking them to make donations, but actually paying them out of the event budget so that they could give away free samples during the event. Four, when stretching out that footprint, especially in a suburban context, to really create dynamic sub-pockets of activity within environments that can sometimes be dominated by parking. And then pairing the event with long-term physical improvements that can last long beyond the event. Next slide, please. So on the ground, this is the Rice and Larpin intersection. And so we crafted the Rice and Larpin tour because sometimes we're a sucker for puns here. But it was a tour around the district, which was sort of anchored with a hub that had COVID-safe outdoor concerts and info tents. There were also some additional like publicly funded patio expansions to support the small businesses and planter improvements that were done that were promoted through this event. We created a sort of a gamification of creating an event passport to go around, and you got rewards and prizes if you went to all the different spots. We also promoted the event through posters and postcards, but also lawn signs were incredibly effective, and especially permeating the neighborhoods to get it awareness into those communities that may not have as much internet access. For the winter event, while we couldn't have an in-person event because COVID was really strong at that point, we created a shop local guide and bought things from the local businesses to give to folks in a drive-up gift bag, which then incentivized them to stay once they got the bag and redeem some of the prizes and coupons at the local businesses. Some of the risks coming into this was that there was a lot of negative narrative around the space and the neighborhood in general around whether people didn't necessarily believe that good things could happen at this given area. There's also a very problematic strip club, is the last strip club in the city of St. Paul located here that caused a lot of bad energy. And so that was kind of dominating a lot of the narrative around the site. And so these events really help to shift that narrative and create that positive counterbalance and prove that lots of good things could happen here. There's also a risk of creating a there and a sense of place during in the suburban environment, and being able to equitably support the small businesses. Some of the success that came out of these events that really contributed to a glowing neighborhood profile in our local newspaper. Hundreds of people attended the event in a new way. 40% of visitors said that they had not been to that district before. And 3 physical improvements were able to be created and promoted during these events that lasted long beyond the event time itself. And so some final lessons for going forward is, partnership again is so important. We utilize the storefronts in the larger event footprint as the event venues. And so being able to closely partner with folks that way. And then again, I think, considering, especially when working with, minority or immigrant-owned businesses and BIPOC-owned businesses, considering using, rather than asking people to contribute free donations, think about opening a budget to pay them to allow them to more meaningfully participate in what was happening. And so some COVID-19 impact lessons going forward is this is a great example of how to execute an attractive event with COVID-safe precautions over a larger footprint. How to embed equity into an event structure, and 3, how to create a sense of place within a suburban context. So with that, I'm delighted to hand over the presentation to Jessica Mortel.
Awesome, thank you so much. That was awesome, Max, and super inspiring. So hi everyone, my name is Jessica. I am a principal and senior placemaker at Neighborways Design. We specialize in transforming streets into safer and more beautiful places for everyone. I'm excited to share a couple case studies today about attracting people downtown through art, interactive engagement, and programming. Next slide, please. So this could be anywhere across the Commonwealth of the US. This is typically a very car-dominated space. These are our alleys. this is such valuable real estate. Our parking lots and spaces that are traditionally used for moving people in cars, we can reimagine those spaces and curate them to be attractive destinations. Next slide. So the first case study I'm going to talk about is actually a private alley in Somerville on Summer Nova's campus. And I know I'm going to name this. Somerville is a very unique, and I love Somerville, a very unique place that is different than anywhere else across the country. There are still some really valuable lessons that you can take and apply to any community across the country and the Commonwealth. So just a little history on Union Square. It was not always the vibrant destination it is today. Back in the 90s, the Ames envelope factory went out of business, laying off 600 people. 10 years it sat vacant, and it was not a place you wanted to hang out in. The city put a lot of effort to revitalize the square with new tenants coming in early 2010s. Next slide. And fast forward, Union and the areas around it are one of my personal favorite places to spend time in the Boston area. We have Aeronaut Brewery. This photo on the left is a photo of their courtyard where you can hang out outside and play games and look at the amazing art. Artisans Asylum. This is really an established maker space and innovation hub, attracting a lot of different tech and startup companies. So in terms of your spaces, thinking about what is the current brand and identity of your community, who are your talents, and how can you tap into your audience and who is not being represented, just thinking about brand and identity for your communities. Next slide. So our project is focusing on the alley connecting the west and east end of campus, Market Basket to the right on the screen and Aeronaut Courtyard to the left. This Frost Alley is an important through connector. It is a really highly activated space with people walking, biking, driving, and deliveries, but it's not a destination. It's somewhere you want to go through very quickly. And our goal is to transform this as a hub of art and creativity and a destination to stay and play. Next slide. Summer Nova is managed by RRP Properties. They are a private company that has engaged us since 2019 to begin planning alongside Principal Group to develop a master plan for the campus. So far to date on this space, we've spent about $50,000. Iteration is key. I just want to name that. Starting small and building off of it year by year. We'll go through this on the next few slides for each phase. So again, this is a forbidding windswept alley that is really a car space. Lots of people walking and biking through here. We've got a lot of complaints. This is somewhere you want to move through quickly. It's not well lit. And our first phase on the next slide, we installed some DIY self-watering planters and to add some green to the space. And just note, maintenance is something to think about when you're installing green. Self-watering, you can actually make this pretty easily yourself. With our labor and materials for these, they were about $250 a piece, noting that the trees are about $100 a piece. So this is really helpful when you're planning your parklets or different spaces that you're trying to use. So we used this to test out circulation and calm traffic to visually narrow the street so people are starting to go slower and encouraging people who are biking and walking to be in the middle of the street. Next slide. And this past month, we installed some pops of art. This is temporary chalk paint we used. We're actually going to engage some of the local residents and artists who live and work near here to do some really fabulous looking art. This was for a Earth Day event that we hosted, so I'll talk more about that in a little bit, but we actually got to put trees in the street without construction, so that's really exciting. Next slide. So the law of attraction, build it and they will come. Yes, and program it. Have outdoor activities for people to look forward to in these spaces. So this is the Somerville Open Studios event. This typically happens across the city, but because of COVID, we pivoted to a couple in-person locations and a virtual market, working with the Somerville Arts Council. I was really excited to go out there and take photos, and I bought an air plant for my friend's birthday party that we had outdoors in a nearby park. You can go to the next slide. And just talking through some of the risks about setting this up, the coordinations and approvals process with the city was important. This is still a fire access alley, so we had the fire department come down and test the design. You can see our placement of our trees and our planters and bike racks are still in alignment with where the parked cars are today. There were some concerns about parking removal by the residents and the tenants near here. And then in terms of performance and key metrics to consider, interviewing people, what they like and didn't like about the space. We had folks out there during our market, a pop-up market last weekend, asking folks and having them write down in the book anything that they liked or didn't like. Are people walking and biking to your events? How long are they staying? Are they lingering and hanging out in your spaces? And especially across multiple events, do you have repeaters coming back? And then when there's not an event happening, are people hanging out in your spaces? These are all things that you can start to think about in terms of how you measure the impacts of your spaces. Next slide. For our partners, we had a lot of local labor engaged in this project. We hired local gardeners. The Somerville Groundworks folks are actually in this complex, and they were hired to help maintain this. Green and Open Somerville, our native plant folks. We had some pollinator gardens installed, and this is a photo of them picking out from a local nursery some of the plants we used for our planters. They also helped us find local delivery services for the soil that had a discount, and we were not purchasing things from big box stores, so really investing in the local economy as a part of your projects. For COVID-19, everyone's seen the signs, get your hand sanitizer. Some of the things to think about in terms of event is circulation, and one of the lessons learned from that event, I went and shopped, and I wanted to go back, and we had one-way circulation down the alley and didn't have a lane for people to circle back around. I would have had to go all the way around the street, so I didn't go back and purchase more things, so that's something to think about when you set up your markets. Next slide. So just to summarize all of our strategies for this, outreach is a part of the process. In the next case study, I'll talk about how to use outreach and engagement to get people to show up to your events and to buy more things. Hiring local artists and creating a space where they are a part of the space. Then they feel a sense of ownership and excitement about it. Calming traffic, slow speeds, lower noise. It's places where people want to hang out. So again, traffic calming is so important for any of these spaces where you're going to attract people. And then having lots of programming potential. You could do a lot of different things, from pop-up markets, movie nights, food trucks, beer gardens, chalk art with prompts, theater and performance. So I'll be talking about this more in our Chelsea feature up next. So we were blessed in 2019 to help envision an amazing project. This is a public alley in Chelsea, Mass on Division Street. And when you think of brand and identity, Chelsea, places like Chelsea and Lynn in particular, are really transforming their brand and identity through public art. If you haven't checked out Beyond Walls and Lynn, highly recommend going for a field trip to go check out all of the cool things there, as well as Chelsea. I'm going to dive in more into that next. So we started in 2019 envisioning the space. We won an RRP grant, so we got to work with a lot of the local seniors from the senior center. That first project, we installed over 22 pieces of art along this alley. You can see the before picture. It was a really blighted, unwelcoming alley, and Public Works went in and they repaved it. They got new sidewalks, and we installed all of this beautiful art that was mostly the community. We did a community paint day and had people come in and do paint by numbers. The seniors had their own panels, and we also hired local artists. So when people talk to people, and when people are excited about a space, they start self-organizing walking tours. Fast forward 2020, Mimi Graney, our amazing client from Chelsea Prospers, she hired a bunch of local artists to just do individual pieces due to the pandemic. And now this year they won a MassDOT Shared Streets grant for $70,000, and we have a very fast timeline to install almost 25,000 square feet of potential roadway space as mural. We're not going to saturate the entire thing. We're working on that now. So we're in the current phase 3. Next slide. So our strategies, just big overarching: beautify through art, amplify local voices and talents, and program your spaces. So the paint day is one strategy. Chelsea, I'm so excited to hang out there this summer. There are so many cool events going on. Next slide. Some of our partners that have been really instrumental, we have a really great roster of local artists. We're going to be putting a call on Facebook and to our local networks. We're going to be purchasing ads and targeting them specifically to the artist community. We have 10 spotlights for all of the artists to be highlighted along the corridor, and we're hoping to engage some of the artists from last year to pull the art from the walls into the street to create a cohesive feel. And in terms of our COVID-19 impact, we had to really be mindful of our event planning over the last year, and I think things are going to be opening up a little bit more with summer. Outdoor events are a little bit different than indoor. So in terms of what we're doing, we are putting out a call for volunteers, and we're going to limit the amount of people who can be there at any time based on current state guidelines for the maximum amount of people you can have. Again, events outdoors are much easier. We're going to be closing the street that we're painting for our paint day. So that's also another piece to think about in terms of circulation and traffic. Next slide. So for the programming, Mimi's team has an amazing event lineup for this year. They have virtual and in-person walking tours happening right now, and the regularity of them is really important. They're happening weekly right now. Chalk Art Saturdays is a really cool program that they're working on. They give students and folks art prompts, and a local artist will be sketching out things on the street. And then lots of pop-up markets. You can see, hopefully, you can see all of the events that are happening in Chelsea. Every Friday, pretty much through November, they're having different markets. So again, the regularity of things, having local people featured is really important in helping spread the word.
Hey, Jessica, we're coming up against our time here. I know you're on your last slide.
I'm wrapping up. Perfect. Thank you. So just a couple key pieces of risks to consider when you're painting on buildings there in private public spaces, to think about your approvals process and any contracts that you need to do. One of the really cool performance metrics we use is the request for more. When people get excited about things, they want more art, they start self-organizing tours, as Max talked about. So this is next slide. This is a rendering of one of the possibilities for the art, and it ends on the next slide at the Apollinaire Theater in Chelsea, where you can go out for dinner and a show. We'll be programming the space with a theater and concerts, and there'll be QR codes with tables where you can order. This will be a food court style to get people to order from local businesses. So that is my wrap. Thanks, Max, for the time check.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Oh, go for it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Moon with Civic Space Collaborative. Continuing on the themes of laws of attraction, we're going to talk about how people like people and how you can use this to help get people to come back downtown. So how do you get people to come back? Showing that there are people in the spaces and showing that people are safe there. This is a photo from last summer from Davis Square that was hopping like every single Friday night when I would bike through. It was very exciting to see. Next slide. So last year we had a really great experiment where a lot of municipalities created systems to quickly permit outdoor dining. So municipalities did a really great job with getting things out there as quick as they possibly could in a couple of months, creating a process out of thin air when there was no process before. Everyone did an excellent job with creating spaces for outdoor dining that were safe and comfortable and welcoming. We made sure that our tables and chairs were all 6 feet apart. They were measured accordingly. Sometimes they got a little bit closer, but people, for the most part, did the spacing very well. And a lot of the spaces were very fun and creative, and they looked amazing to go sit outside. And I'm looking forward to that this summer as well. So these really awesome spaces can just help to get more people to come back. So that was last year. And looking through the samples of like what everyone did, it was sort of amazing to see. And all of us were very homebound and may not know what's happening even a mile or two away. And so we need to really step it up and promote all of our awesome work that we did in downtown. And also with making it easy to walk and bike to different places. So I'm going to talk a bit about how to promote it and just a sort of overview example of some different outreach tools, and then also to talk about one specific project. So promoting your activities downtown, we all say pictures are worth 1,000 words. So posting photos on social media, getting them in newspapers, showing all the outdoor dining, public art, walkways, showing all of that with photos is really great. So this can be done internally with your city or staff at your municipality, If you have a main streets, great, they can help host it. If you have a business improvement district, they can also do that. Chamber of Commerce and other nonprofits. And something that has worked really well with, especially with social media, is creating a set of materials that can easily be shared. So let's say the nonprofit has a kit of for promotion, and they tell their partners in the neighborhood to say, oh, I'm gonna be sharing this post on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Can you share it to your network too? And this can really help drive up a lot of attention. And the budget, you know, can be done internally for $0. You could hire a photographer to take some really great photos. You could hire a marketing specialist. So maybe, like, let's say you want to do $1,000 for a budget, or maybe you really want to go all out on marketing, and you could even spend more than that. Location, this can happen in any downtown. Time frame, you might probably want to establish some sort of routine at the beginning of the season. Are you doing this weekly? Are you doing this monthly? So making sure you kind of have a plan of action. So you want to, okay, next slide. That's good. And with promoting all of these awesome outdoor dining spaces and public art and neighborways and whatever, you want to have a multiple different ways to reach people with promoting things in newspapers, e-newsletters, and in social media. And it's awesome when you can reuse some of these different pieces, so then you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. So here's a few examples of different postings and newspaper articles. And I've seen a lot of lists of like hot summer places to eat in downtown Boston this year. And, you know, dining's coming back, and the city of Boston has approved X number of spaces. And I really like this one for the Berkshires from a few weeks ago, showing how the snow is in the forecast, but outdoor dining is as well. And really highlighting all stages of the process to get people, you know, aware that these things are being permitted, showing the installation. Here we have an example from Northampton, where they had a little video of showing how everything was installed. And then once it's out there, like reminding people that it's there. Next slide. And here's an examples of ones from across the state. We have municipalities that post main streets, business improvement districts, and showing where are these spaces. So a lot of people are concerned about the spacing. Are the chairs 6 feet apart? So the photos can really help to eliminate some of those concerns in advance, and showing, oh yes, these tables are 6 feet apart. So then they'll feel comfortable coming to be around other people. And if they see other people there and they're all socially distant, people will feel more comfortable. And I think we're all very excited and eager to see everyone's smiling faces this summer, with or without masks. We can tell when people are smiling. And you can see with this one example in the middle with the town of Great Barrington, you could see how many times it was shared, this post on social media, and it was shared 45 times, I think. And that's a really great way to let people know that this outdoor dining is happening. And so then your network begins to know about it, or the towns adjacent to it. And oh, go back. And in the bottom right, I have a couple of examples. Here's one from the city of Boston showing the murals that are in Chinatown. And this, so, you know, people come to downtown not just to eat and drink and shop, but also maybe to see artwork. And maybe then they can make a day out of it, or a half a day out of it. Since we're not really hopping on planes, local tourism is really up. So highlighting these awesome art projects as well. And also remember that there are nonprofit or other social services that are being provided that could also be promoted. And here's an example from the city of Boston, highlighting some of their free breakfast programs as well. So it's really important to get the word out about a variety of different things. And with Rosendale Main Streets, they have a farmer's market, and many communities across the state do. And what they did last year is they showed, they did regular posts. So it was very strategic that with what they were sharing, and making sure that something was shared pretty regularly, showing what their setup was, showing that it is comfortable. People are spaced, people are wearing masks, highlighting local businesses, who's there. And I really like this one from the winter, showing like what their system is, because the systems have been changing so much, and it's like, well, do I need to pay in advance with the phone? Do I go up there? Like, these things can prevent a whole trip from happening. So then people aren't spending money, even though you're out there, either with a market or with a business. So this was like, oh yes, you can place your order in advance, and this is who's there. And so then you know what you're getting into before going there. And if you have bathrooms, maybe mention that one too, because that can also prevent whole trips from happening. Next slide. And here's sort of a good reference for later of what are some budgets and timelines for these things. The first few are about the permitting process and buying materials and what are some of the low estimates, like if you just went to Home Depot and bought something off the shelf, and some mid-range estimates, and then some quick timelines. For social media, as I mentioned, it can be as little as $0. Maybe you want to spend $1,000 or more, but you really should be doing this throughout the season, showing all these awesome places with outdoor dining, the programs, and reminding people that they're coming up, and post it in the local newspaper because people do them. Maybe you want to also do something on your TV station as well. So that's just an overview of promoting all of the awesome work from last year. And how do you get people to come downtown? It's my next slide.
Hey, Michelle.
Yep.
Yeah, just to give you one, just cruise through this one. We're at 1:12.
I am cruising. Okay. We're talking about biking, so we'll cruise. So this is a project called the Fairmont Greenway in the city of Boston. Next slide, which is a proposed 9-mile walking biking route going from about the south end to Hyde Park. And with that, we're creating what's called a neighborhood, like what Jess has been talking about. Next slide. And we have been working on trying to mark this route for a very long time using permanent metal signs, and we switched it to corrugated plastic signs this past year. We had a design already in the works, and we just updated a little bit to highlight where the local commercial districts are. And we had a lot of different partners to do this, and we're installing 12 signs. You can go on to the next slide. This year, over 1.5 mile stretch on the left is an example of the sign. So we're pointing people to where are the train stations and to the business districts to show how easy and quick it is to walk and bike there. So we're going to be installing that this month. Next slide. And then here's the sign we had it printed a few weeks ago. That's me holding it up. And so we're very excited to be installing this. And this was a very inexpensive project to print. We did 13 signs in total, 12 that will be posted, and a test print to see the colors. Very important to make sure to do the test print. And it was like $250 to print. And I need to order some zip ties, also very cheap. The graphic design was the most expensive just because we had a full process of determining what people liked and didn't like, and spent a long time hand curating those silhouettes to make sure they were reflective of the community. But folks are stoked to have this because in the neighborhood of Dorchester, because it's not very walking and biking friendly. This will help get people out in a space where they don't have a lot of spaces and get them to their business districts and to the train station. Was that cruisy enough for you, Max?
It was
So
great.
here's the budget.
Like a 3-wheel bike cruising.
Yeah, so here's what I went through with the budget. So you can see it's very inexpensive.
All right, Susan, take it away.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you can see me. I'm Susan Silberberg. I'm principal at Civic Moxie. We're a full service planning firm with specialties in commercial district revitalization, as well as arts and culture, and really moving plans to action. So I'm going to kind of take the theme of what everyone has talked about and kind of do a little bit of a wrap up in terms of how to use projects to create a kind of long-term stickiness around collaboration and sustainability within a district. Next. First, just thinking about the first case is hosting a block party to launch ground floor activation and also testing collaborative efforts within a district as part of a larger term project. Next. So the work was for a mass development TDI project in collaboration with the City of Worcester, the Business Development Corporation, and the Hanover Theater. And we were looking at overall development opportunities for full buildings as well as ground floor activation. And in the middle of the planning process, as we began to work out an implementation of various strategies, you can see on the chart, the yellow ones were really kind of low barrier, easy strategies to get and attract customers downtown, as well as kind of ephemeral events. Next. So we put something into action and looking at where the vacant buildings were in the downtown, as well as ground floor vacancies, which are shown on the mapping we did on the right. Next. We looked at really what could be, if you could do next slide, please. we looked at where were the optimum locations within the downtown. So thinking about if we were going to do public space activation, how do we get the most for it in terms of the long term? And those goals really were about getting customers used to coming downtown, feeling comfortable, but also trying to attract people so that we could look at rentals of those ground floor spaces for stores, as well as redevelopment of whole buildings. So we chose a space in front of the Hanover Theater. It's on the map on the right, because it was a very active and still is a vibrant destination in downtown as kind of the anchor for the beginning of the activities. Next. So what we did and what we find in a lot of projects, our projects are a little bit different than the earlier ones where someone's hired to do all of the placemaking or public activation. We're doing larger plans, thinking about strategies for long-term revitalization and short-term strategies. Often our clients don't have the capacity or the resources in terms of going forward with something. They don't have the graphic capabilities, technical expertise for mapping, thinking about that. So these are action kits that we developed that actually kind of measured spaces, came up with placemaking, kit of parts for this project so that we could use this block party that we did as part of an overall setting up a framework so the client could move forward in the future. Next. Part of that was we did some renderings of the district downtown. Thinking about goals, some of this was about looking at public perception of the downtown. And in this case, other than the Hanover Theater, there were really no nighttime uses. And people were a bit afraid to go downtown in nighttime. So beginning to develop some renderings and really put in the public perception about, oh, I could be there at night. I see this in this rendering. And we chose activation around the Hanover Theater to build what was already a nighttime destination. Next. So the block party happened. It was a good success. There was a swing band, a local community college participated in the music aspect of it. Hanover Theater aligned it with the opening groundbreaking for their conservatory. And we also had food trucks there as well and lots of collaboration. Next. The time frame from the beginning of the concept, which happened during our overall planning for the whole district, was about 4 months from the conceptual idea to pulling together all of the partners and then the final planning. The budget was under $10,000. There was a lot of volunteer labor, both from the community, but also from staff working on this project. Next. One of the great outcomes of this was thinking about what the factors were measuring success, lots of collaborations. We call it building the civic water cooler. And in this case, it was all of the entities that came together. Public safety, the city manager's office around streamlined permitting, business development corporation, property owners, nonprofits, really made this work. And that was really the intention of the project, is to get them all used to working together. Next. And so the risk here is the same risk that we see in a lot of projects, is that if you're tying it to something and there's low turnout, then everything gets a bad rap from that kind of low turnout. I think another risk is just kind of misjudging what the budget's going to be and what revenue might be coming in from various things, and burnout when you're relying on volunteers. Over 500 attended the block party, so that was a key performance indicator and considered a great success, as well as the more than 10 entities that worked together. The other big indicator for this was that collaboration of that project resulted in the formation of a bid, and that bid actually came into existence at the beginning of last year. And so the bid has now taken over all of these public space activation events and activities and really modeled how everyone could work together. Next. The second project is using a pilot project to kind of model what a long-term infrastructure project would be. So it was about getting people on board and doing what we think of as kind of building civic collaborative muscle, like everyone working together to make something happen. Next. This project was Manchester Connects. It was actually a multimodal transportation and land use plan that was funded by the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission with a lot of collaboration. And early in the project, what came out of a survey we did was that connectivity, physical connectivity between the river and the mill yard and downtown, as well as connectivity to arts and culture and history, were really important to everyone. Next. And why that was important is that you can see the mill yards, the Amoskeag mill yards, and the river on the left. On the right is Elm Street and the downtown, and they're separated topography. There's a hill going up to the downtown, and there are a couple of wide roadways, including a rail line that's used sporadically for freight that separates downtown from the mill yard. And so all of those thousands of workers in the Amoskeag mill yard who could be coming for lunch and dinner and after work drinks or shopping don't go up to downtown. And so in this case, it was about attracting a larger region of customers as well as ones that are right next door. And so we see the topography change. There are stairs on some streets. It's just not a friendly environment. Next. And so we developed a plan to get over some of these challenges. And some of the challenges are really kind of inactive ground floor space. You can see on the left that over 73% of this area connecting the two was either office space or vacant, and not a lot of third places, the kind of coffee shops and neutral places that people come together and want to be at. And to understand the scale of the problem, we actually overlaid the New Hampshire Mall, the Mall of New Hampshire in Manchester. That footprint on the right is the mall, which is a really large mall. We overlaid it on just part of the area we were looking at and understood, wow, to walk from downtown on the right down to the river in the mill yard with nothing happening is really a really big challenge. Next. And so we developed, in analyzing the spaces, what was known as the loop. So on the right is a map, and we identified the streets that had the most interest or the most pleasant physical environment, as well as the least physical barriers in terms of going from a higher grade to a lower grade. And then we mapped it out with various interventions that would happen. Public art, seating, sidewalk art, parklets, putting in infrastructure for bike racks that we're going to connect to the longer term kind of bike loop in the town, and really highlighted this. And this was a launch project that our client and the steering committee started planning while we were still in the overall plan for the entire area. Next. And so this project, this loop project, which was an event that happened in early October of that year, really brought together so many different interests. It was about public art. The Public Art Fund was able to pay artists to do some murals during the time. It was New Hampshire Institute of Art. It was Riverwalk advocates, philanthropists, businesses, restaurants, the bike advocates, University of New Hampshire, which is in the mill yard. And all of these coming together, they all had an interest in making this work. And so everyone collaborated on this. And it was really a kind of model for how do you move forward to really make the best use of resources to get things done within the community. Next. Part of this was a collaborative mapping that we've developed when you're thinking about recommending the projects for downtown, to bring everyone together and to really, we work through this process on these big posters. What do you want to achieve? And then are there smaller goals within that larger goal? Bringing people to downtown. Well, that's a pretty big goal. You could handle that a lot of ways. We really get into the finely grained, what are all the ways you can achieve it? And then what are the ones most likely to have impact, and who are the partners going to be? So you're really matching the level of effort with what the value is that you're going to get. Next, and I'm just about wrapped up here. So we developed an action kit for the loop and the Riverwalk, and on the right map shows all of the public space activation areas that we identified in the downtown area and the Riverwalk, of where events could happen and the environment really needed to be connected. And then the middle piece was part of this kit, is looking at what were all of the permitting or other actions that needed to happen to make some of these events happen. And it was an eye-opener for a lot of people and really brought the city on as part of this. Next. So the time frame was 5 months. It was all done by members of the steering committee. University of New Hampshire put a staff member, co-chaired this. It was a minimal budget, mostly volunteers, paid staff from partnering organizations, and in-kind donations, and came together as a way to say, we really support this larger idea about Manchester Connects, about bringing people, places, and ideas together. The indicators here for success really were getting people out and enthused about longer term momentum on the project. And again, the risks are the same ones. A lot of people putting effort in on a volunteer basis. And how is that sustainable over the long run? And the risk is it doesn't translate into a kind of sustainable framework, or people don't show up. And then it kind of drags down the credibility of everything going on. Next. So in wrap up, what we would say is that there are kind of 4 key elements to really make sure there's a longer term stickiness, that the kind of shorter term events that you're doing longer term. And one is clear goals. And I have to say, in most of the business districts we work in, sometimes festival and events and block parties actually detract from the business and revenue from restaurants and businesses. And thinking about a way to get the people in for activities to the stores and the restaurants instead of having them focused on food trucks or other events. Really important to know what your goals are and how do you align interests. So there are a lot of collaborators, and so they're all putting out social media, all of their constituents are coming. So you really are building in this sense of attraction. 3 is collaborative framework. You want to create something that's going to last for the long term. You put a lot of effort into 1 or 2 events. How do you really stretch that? You're over the learning curve. And then lastly, kind of building in technical assistance. What do clients need to get started? Do they need graphics help? Do they have savvy with social media? Thinking about ways to get that on the front end, just to get them launched, to get into the things that they want to do. So that's it in terms of near-term and longer-term stickiness. Thanks.
All right, well, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much, and looking forward to spending the last couple of minutes for Q&A.
Hi, everyone. I want to read the first question, and that question is, of all these projects, if someone wanted to start somewhere, where should they look for funding?
I would say for some of these, I would look in your storage units. Oftentimes you have the supplies to start something right away. And even to do something for a day with things you already have in your possession, that oftentimes generates the momentum that brings in funding, interest in funding once that even small proof of concept is done.
I know MassDOT just released a new round of a bonus round of their shared streets funding. RRP community grants are really great. Your local business districts and improvement districts, your neighborhood associations, a lot of time it's crowdfunding and crowdsourcing and tapping into existing department budgets. If you have a striping crew from your DPWs or pallets are a really great way. The Tactical Urbanism Guide is a really great place to check out for inspiration on how to pop up spaces pretty quickly. And I see Michelle going off mute if there's anything else you want.
I was going to say on that long list too, like with arts councils too, that they'll help.
Thank you, guys.
And then Max mentioned your closet, check your neighbor's closet too, because you can borrow things from, maybe someone has something in their shed or the city has something they can loan out, or the schools.
I think it depends on your idea and the space that you want to use, and checking in with property owners if it's not publicly owned. Without the context of the project, it's challenging, but there's a lot of different sources you can tap into.
So for the next question, have you had any luck attracting an older crowd to these events, and how do you attract an older crowd to these events?
I would say involve them in the planning. Events, I'm thinking about the block party event. It had a swing band that, was a suggestion from some of the older volunteers, and it really engaged everyone. But thinking about how to involve them in planning and is a really great way to know they're going to show up.
Yeah, and then working in Dorchester with a lot of neighborhood groups too, like they have neighborhood associations and like literally door knock and flyer their neighborhoods, and they know all the seniors in their neighborhood. So if they're having a block party, a barbecue, a cookout, like they know the older folks, and so because they have a relationship with them, it's community, and so they show up.
One of the strategies we love to do is that canvassing, absolutely, Michelle, and finding the mayor on the street. So usually the people who have lived there the longest know everybody, and that's a great way to tap into the local networks, and asking for them to be involved and for their help in spreading the word. They will have really great resources to tap into. The RRP grant also is a great way. We've worked with the senior center and had some of the seniors from the senior center paint some of those panels. So they came down and we did a whole ribbon cutting ceremony and invited them. So that was really cool.
Thank you. For the next question, thinking about programming, could anyone talk about experiences / past programs in small towns around local workforce training initiatives, training program incubated with local businesses, restaurants, etc.?
I think that the training programs we generally see as something separate from these attraction events. And I think that the training programs just call to mind that you need a multi-pronged approach when you're thinking about attracting customers and about really supporting business districts. And it's about business recruitment, it's about worker training and support, it's about customer attraction. In our work, it's been a kind of separate stream.
Yeah, we haven't done anything directly, but I've seen effective collaborations like that around folk schools that are emerging or have been around for a while. Also, some culinary schools, sometimes those can provide good access for both workforce training and programming. And then I think are the trade schools and technical colleges oftentimes they're doing a lot of interesting stuff, and I could see a lot of synergies between bringing some of those activities out into the public realm and turning them into programming.
Thank you, guys. So for the next question, can speakers touch on the data or stats that we're able to collect from their projects? What hard data / evidence do you have that the projects such events made an impact in the community?
I know some of the data that we've collected, social media impressions, PR, surveying the businesses to see what their felt impact was, if they sense any differences in sales, usage counts, testimonials, others that mentioned here, pilots that turned into long-term programs. I think it also depends on what the project goals are and just making sure you're collecting data that align with what those goals are from the front end.
Yeah, with a project I didn't talk about in Roslindale, where we did a 1-week pop-up street where we duct taped it and created a plaza. We had one business who kept track of their ticket sales, and it was a very rainy week in May, and he didn't earn as much money, but he had more ticket sales overall. And for him, that was a great success to get potential new customers.
Great. And for the last question, all artists, may not be good at public art. So I guess in Chelsea or in other situations, how are artists chosen to create murals? Kind of what's the, review process to, pick someone who's going to do a good job?
I already answered this one in the chat if folks want to read that, but I can just kind of pontificate on it. We go through a process where we put a call out for artists, and we usually use a Google form or ask them to send a portfolio. And it's also, we have staff artists at NeighborWays, so we mentor folks through the process. That's something really important. If someone has no experience and has never done this before, especially public art, that is going to be really challenging if you yourself have not done that. So having experienced folks mixed in with less experienced folks, because that's how they get experience, is important. Yeah, we've also done selection committees, whether it's the client or We had in Everett for Beautification Way, we had the local high school art teachers, and we formed a panel. I think we had about 10 submissions, 10, 15 submissions, and we needed 10 artists. So it all just depends on how many submissions you get as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to do this, but it's very true that not everyone's a good fit for being a public artist. And we've had some success too with just like the community partner sees an artist, they like their artwork, and they talk with them directly. But I think it's most important that the artwork is appropriate for the community, and the artist is okay with a community process where the community might be telling them a little bit more than they would like, what colors or things, and being okay with that.
Thank you all. I appreciate you answering these questions, and I'll hand it to Max to wrap up.
All right. Well, thank you all for your time. On behalf of the panel, thank you, Michelle, Susan, Jessica. Thanks for everyone for spending their time with us today. We're grateful to share our expertise and hope that it helps you in the revitalization and attraction to your downtown, so that you can all become the Cupids for your community to help people re-fall in love with your downtowns. So thank you again to the state of Massachusetts, Charles, Emmy, Street Sense, and the whole team as well.